Hey screen printers, today we're going to review the different types of emulsion available from Ryonet. Here before us on the table we have 6 different brands of emulsion. Now these are the main emulsions Ryonet sells. A lot of printers have questions wondering around like what emulsion is the best for their application. So let's review the different types of emulsion and what applications they're best for in the screen printing process. First of all, we have 2 groups of emulsion here. Right here we have our photopolymer emulsions. We have Hi-Fi Blue and Hi-Fi Pink, and then SVP emulsion. Photopolymer are pre-sensitized emulsions that already have the photopolymer or light-sensitive properties mixed into them. They're faster exposing, they have longer shelf lives, and they're actually high-performing emulsions, typically used in high-production screen shops. Photopolymer emulsions are typically not recommended for starter screen printers. The reason that it is because they expose faster, they have smaller exposure latitudes. I mean, think about it. If you have less time to expose something, you have less time of forgiveness to mess up in. So right here we have diazo or dual cure emulsions. And what a dual cure emulsion stands for is that diazo bottle is actually a dual cure process that you mix into the emulsion that activates it. So before these emulsions are mixed, they're not light sensitive. Out of the box, the photopolymer emulsions are light sensitive because remember they have the pre-photopolymers mixed into the emulsion themselves. But a diazo or dual cure emulsion is not sensitized until you actually mix the diazo bottle in. In a box, they last about a year before the diazo is mixed in. Once that diazo is mixed in, stirred around with water, it becomes light sensitive and lasts for about 3 months on average. Sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit longer. These also expose a lot longer than the photopolymer emulsions. So kind of the common misconception is that, well, since I have to mix this emulsion and it doesn't last as long, let's go with the photopolymer emulsion. And that's true if you've really dialed your exposure times in and you know what you're doing in the screen printing process. But because this has a wider exposure latitude, because it exposes longer, the diazo emulsions, dual cure emulsions are actually a lot easier to use as you're starting screen printing. The other thing about the diazo emulsions is they're a stronger emulsion. Because of the diazo property, it actually builds a stronger stencil. Because it exposes longer, it makes a stronger stencil. So in use of water-based and discharge printing or any aggressive inks, this emulsion is going to last longer on the screen for you. So those are the 2 primary types of emulsions. Once again, photopolymer emulsions we would recommend for more advanced screen printers. Diazo or dual cure emulsions, definitely starting out as a screen printer, we'd recommend using this. As you advance, get better exposure units, get more familiar with the exposure processes, and have an exposure calculator, you can move to photopolymer emulsions. As far as price goes, these are slightly more expensive, but because they're faster exposing, typically the ROI is even board across from the diazo or dual cure emulsions. And if you're doing a lot of screens, it definitely does make sense to go to a photopolymer emulsion because you're exposing 3 to 4 times as fast. So we split the emulsions up into 2 categories, but let's jumble them around into the different applications for emulsion. Now we see the emulsions stacked up a little bit differently. They're stacked up in 3 stacks for 3 different styles of applications in the screen printing process. Here in the middle we have WBP emulsion. Now WBP stands for water-based plastisol. This emulsion is built for plastisol, but it's also built for water-based and discharge styles of inks. Now if we're going to print water-based or discharge styles of inks with our standard plastisol emulsion, the water or the discharge agents in the water-based and discharge ink, those carriers, that water-based carrier will actually eat away the emulsion. Most emulsions are above 70% water, so if they start to get a lot of water absorbed into them, they break down, meaning that ink's going to actually leak through your screen and your stencil is going to fall apart. That's no good, right? Because you need your stencil to hold solid so your image looks good from first print to the last print of the job. The thing that is great about the WBP emulsion is it works for both water-based discharge and plastisol. So if you're doing all 3 processes in your shop, you can stick with this emulsion and you're good to go. Now it is a diazo emulsion. The reason why it is a diazo emulsion is because, remember, the diazo emulsions are a little bit stronger and hold up against harsh inks in the screens. We would consider water-based and discharge a little bit harsher ink to the stencil. Now, water-based is obviously not a harsh ink in itself because it's an environmentally friendly ink typically. But as far as stencil terms go, it does give a little bit more wear and tear on that stencil. So if you're printing in your shop with water-based discharge or plastisol, also if you're printing with like the Ryocharge or Plasticharge, which is a kind of the hybrid discharge plastisol ink, this is a great emulsion to use. Now over here we have our graphic emulsions. Graphic emulsions are great for solvent and UV inks. Now graphic emulsions would be like for sign printing, printing on metal, glass. Graphic inks, solvent inks or UV inks or epoxy inks are much, much harder on the screen than, let's say, Plastisol or even water-based. So these emulsions are built very, very strong so that they can work with those very aggressive inks. We have two different styles of graphic emulsion. We have our photopolymer SVP emulsion, and we have our diazo DCM emulsion. Now the diazo is a little bit stronger, but it's slower exposing. So the SVP is also a great emulsion, and it's faster exposing for those high performance shops. Now both of these emulsions you can also use with Plastisol. So if you're doing some graphic signs and you need an emulsion for Plastisol, you can use this style of emulsion. You cannot use this style of emulsion for water-based because water-based will break that down. So the cool thing about these two emulsions, styles of emulsion, is they could be used for either Plastisol or their other ink property, which would, in this case, the WBP would be water-based discharge or ryochar. With this case, it would be the solvent-based or the UV-based inks. So the nice thing about any of these emulsions is you can actually use a screen hardener to make them even a little bit stronger. So this is called Harden X. And what the Harden X does is it's a chemical that basically locks in that emulsion. Now it does make it harder to reclaim, but it basically will harden up that stencil. So if you have a long run of water-based ink and you only have RXP emulsion or you only have Hi-Fi emulsion, instead of having to go out and get a different WBP emulsion, you can actually use this hardener to harden that screen up so it will last with that water-based job. So here are your options for emulsions. Depending on your application and use in screen printing, you need to decide on what is the best option for you. Remember, there are some nice hybrid emulsions that will work for both processes, which may be a good thing for you to start out with looking if you're doing multiple styles of inks or multiple styles of screen print processes. Check out more videos on these emulsions on our YouTube channel and on the website. Thanks a lot for watching.